Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 632. Releasing September 20 in theaters across the US and September 24 on video on demand is Beezel, a horror film that tells the story of how three generations of families are hounded by a sinister presence living beneath the floors of a New England home. A terrifying horror experience that introduces a new movie monster for the horror masses to feast on. Beezel also marks the latest film from acclaimed genre filmmaker tandem Aaron Fradkin and Victoria Fratz Fradkin. And I'm glad to say that both with me today. How are you both?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So I was saying off air about how much this movie terrified me, and I got to tell you why. So when I was a kid, I used to have a a dream, just what I call like a repetitive dream, right? And the dream was I go downstairs into like this basement area that I had in my home, and in the dark corner, a monster will rise from the shadows and chase after me. So when I watch the trailer and I'm watching this film, there was a certain amount of callback to those dreams I used to have. Because to me, there's nothing scarier than just staring at a dark corner of a room, whether it be in a dream or real life or in a movie, and to see something kind of come out of there. So the first question is, Aaron, I got to ask, where did the concept kind of come up regards to Beezel, this character, this kind of like this story? How did it all kind of come about for you and Victoria?
Well, it started a very long time ago. I was actually 6 years old. 1994, I moved into the house that we actually shot the film in with my parents. And I just remember at that age being absolutely terrified every night that I would go to bed. My bedroom was situated right above the basement.
Mm,
And inside the basement was a giant boiler that would just make all of these loud, creaky sounds. And next to the basement, alongside the staircase that led downstairs, was a wooden door that led to a crawl space that led in between the walls of the entire home. And sometimes when I'd have friends over, it was fun to go in there and explore. But when you're 6, 7, 8 years old and you're home alone, your imagination goes wild. And so when we wrote this film, since we knew we were going to be shooting in the house that I grew up in, it was very easy to draw from all of these, just my imagination as a child. And it was very fun to sort of go back in time and remind myself how truly scared I was at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And the house was hugely inspirational for both of us. Like when I was first invited over to his family house, I visited it. I was like, how come we never talked about the fact that you lived in a haunted house? How come this was not on date, number 5? But
mm,
I think that the house was a huge inspiration. And then I don't know if you've seen any of these, but we do a lot of short horror films and we release
yes.
them on YouTube. And so working with those short form stories really also lent itself to some stories that we maybe created during the pandemic when we really didn't have any resources. And then we thought, there's actually a cooler, like we need to just expand this or sharpen this or sculpt this, and that can live on over here in the Beezel feature. So that was really like the genesis of the first segment we shot, which is the middle segment, the night nurse
It was
scene.
it was a rather unconventional way to make a movie. We shot what we thought was going to be just a short film in an anthology. We went back home to California. I cut it together. We showed it to a lot of people, and the feedback was just so resoundingly positive. And we looked at each other. We're like, we made a very scary movie. Like this short film is very scary. Why make an anthology? Why not just expand the story that we've already started? Write what happened before, write what happened after. So we went back to Massachusetts in the middle of a snowstorm and we lived there for 2.5 weeks. We shot out the rest of the movie. And that's sort of how like much of the writing process began.
Victoria, when it comes to the character itself, Beezel, did you guys mess with different type of ideas of what your goal in this movie was going to be, or did you know that you wanted to go down a very specific path of what type of creature it is, what type of and the look of it as well? How does that all kind of come about in this movie?
Yeah, yeah. So that was definitely a big discussion because in the horror world, I think that a lot of your projects could live or die by your creature, your villain, your antagonist. And so sculpting Beezel was a huge discussion that we had. we knew that we wanted her to be this sort of ancient being, and we felt, I think, I mean, it was probably more in your nightmares that you were like, I want this kind of like creepy older woman. So you kind of like build from things that you're already inspired by, and that's kind of got us in the jumping off point. And then when I started thinking about, well, Beezel lives in the foundation of this house. She lives really kind of subterranean. She's ancient. She's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. She's probably, her look is probably akin to like roots and gnarled branches and tree branches. So she has this very crackly kind of like tree branch look to her design. And yeah, that felt right. The more you did it, and you're putting that together, where does she live and what does she do and how long has she been around? Her look really kind of like started taking shape to become Beezel.
And she lives in the darkness, so just like a bat, she doesn't even need to use her eyes all that much, and that's why we made her blind.
Mhm.
Massachusetts, when it comes to that area of America, it's like the lore of that area, especially like Salem and such like that. There's things that happened in the past there. I don't want to give away too much in regards to the movie and such, in regards to what the creature is, because I want that to be fresh. But there is a kind of connection there. How much does living in Massachusetts and the history of that area play into what we have here when you have a creature who is from the earth, ancient, considering the history of that area as well? Is there any type of relation, at all, Aaron, or is this something I'm just kind of just
It just sort
pulling
of
off again?
it just sort of worked out that way. I don't think we decided to make a movie about a witch because we were shooting in Massachusetts, but as we were developing the story and the backstory of Beezel and who she is and where she comes from, we actually did write out a full page of Beezel's backstory that we didn't really explore in the film. We just, in making the movie, wanted to understand where she came from just so that we could make the lore, consistent.
Mhm.
And who knows if there's ever a sequel, that is a detail that that is a story that we might explore. Um, but yeah, it just sort of worked out that way that, we are a stone's throw away from Salem, and there is a lot of really interesting and awful history there.
Victoria, you mentioned before about short films that you guys made with the social house films, and I recommend everyone go to that YouTube page and watch their short films. And one film that really sticks out for everyone, of course, is Diet. How that kind of that's just like I think it's up to like 9 million views now. I mean, that's just like a phenomenal, just the amount of views that movie's got, and for good reason as well. It's a fantastic short film. The thing what I love about that film, and I love about what you guys do with Beezel, is that you guys mess with conventions, you mess with tropes, you think something's going to happen and it isn't. You even do things in this movie where you might have what could be the money shot in other horror movies, like a gore scene and stuff. You play it off camera. You rely on noise effects. You rely on being still. I was mentioning before about how you'll point the camera into a corner and you will wait there and you let us, the audience, kind of come up with our own things. And for me, you kind of go back to that kind of like the dreams that nightmares that I had as a kid. How important is it for you both, Victoria, when it comes to messing with conventions? You do so, but you do so at the same time and not being too slick with it as well. Because I think sometimes it might be a fine line to like kind of messing with people, but at the same time just getting a tad too much into the wrong territory and maybe making it frustrating, because it isn't at all. It's actually the perfect kind of way that you kind of approach it and execute it on film, both short and feature.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, you're touching on something that's really that I'm very passionate about as a writer, which is, as the writer and the filmmaker, you're just one piece of the puzzle. You also need the viewer for, the person who, just someone who's hopefully going to enjoy the project. And I feel like that's the partnership that you make with that viewer is, I'm going to set it up and I really want you to fill it in. Like, there's going to be some breadcrumbs for you, but I really hope that you can fill in this area. And I would love to hear your interpretation of it. And I want your imagination to fill in the rest. And there's nothing that I can even do on this earth that's going to get inside your brain and under your skin better than you can with your own imagination. So I think it's really just, I hope it's my job and it's my great joy to set that up and prepare the space for a viewer to take it the rest of the way with their imagination, with what they hear and just kind of like what the setup and the context has been given. That's something I really look forward to in the writing. So I really like that you asked that. And then regarding Diet, I really want to just give all credit to Aaron with that story, because it's so him. And it was a funny concept of time, because we were on a hike and he just kind of called back to me. I was behind him and he's like, what do you think about this? And this happens and this happens. And I was listening and I was like, I love it. Let's make it. And then he really went off to the races and ran with that one. It was very fun. It's very him.
I think it's
Polar Ops,
especially
yeah.
it's especially satisfying for people that watch a lot of short horror films on YouTube. A lot of short horror films follow a very standard kind of formula where there's a gimmick or a hook, and then it builds and builds and builds to the final jump scare, monster reveal, and that's the end. And so, we just thought that it would be funny to completely flip that on its face and mess with the convention a little bit. So I do appreciate you commenting on that. It means a lot. And that was also certainly our goal with Beezel, is to mess with convention and still tell a traditional 3-act story structure, but make it so that the audience never knows where this is going. It is a very unpredictable movie, that I can say for sure. 20 minutes in, you're going to ask yourself, what the hell is going on and where is this going?
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you will love. And I haven't had a carrot since then, by the way, since absolutely speaking of messing with convention and the unpredictable nature of the film, dream sequences do play a part in the movie because there's a psychological aspect of being in this cursed house. One of my favorite movies of all time that has great dream sequences is An American Werewolf in London, because they kind of come out of nowhere and they kind of really surprise you with it. And when I was watching this movie, the way the dream sequences are presented in this film is kind of like just shocking, but like very brief, but at the same time very kind of memorable kind of scenes that really kind of stuck with me after I watched them. When it comes to dream sequences, Aaron, how did you want to approach it in this movie? Did you always wanted to make sure that you wanted to have it kind of like out? It kind of feels, dreams are very surreal, so it's kind of off kilter. That's the nature of this film as well. It kind of off kilter. Sometimes it merges with reality. Sometimes it comes out of it as well. How do you like to go about doing it, and how did you think about placing it in this movie?
Sometimes you want the audience to know that their main character is in a dream. Sometimes you don't, and that's why we have a lot of dreams within dreams in this film. I think playing with expectations is very important, like we were just talking about. And you do that by maybe giving the audience a clear suggestion that we are in a dream and letting that just be, and then completely flipping it on its head and realizing that you're actually in a dream within a dream. And then you wake up and it's another dream, and it's we still try to do that in our own original way. I also think that within dreams there are no rules. And that's very freeing as a storyteller, where nothing has to really make sense so long as it makes sense to the character that is enduring the horrors.
I got to ask, Victoria, when it comes to technology in this movie, it plays a vital role, because you're going through 3 generations of families here, and they're all dealing with technologies a different way. There's a reel-to-reel tape recorder. There's a video camera at the end, digital video camera at the end. What's the role of technology, do you think, in this movie? Because they all play a role some way or another, where people are listening to things, watching things, they're recording things. It's a really kind of interesting aspect in this movie.
For sure. So there were 2 aspects. There's the storytelling aspect, which you're kind of touching on already. It's that connective tissue. So the movie being about 60 years, and these different generations of homeowners or people who are visiting the house, they each need to see what happened before them or discover something. And so those pieces act as a nice connective tissue for the new characters understanding what happened from the past, the terrors. And then from a cool production standpoint, or at least I think it's cool. We really wanted to show the passage of time through technology. So by opening up on 8mm, and we shot on true 8mm, we were able to help convey that that was in the 60s, really cement that timepiece, that time period in concrete. And then the next segment was done with the JVC video camera, and that's helping us convey, we were still in the 80s at that point, right? In the 80s. And then the then there's the tape recorder. So that's, another like nice moment where I'm not the biggest fan of using cell phones whenever I can avoid it. So probably flip phones would have been around at that time, but we chose to do a tape recorder, just felt a little more textured. And then mini DV would be that kind of in the 2010s. So that was our way of trying to transition the viewer visually through the time periods of the house.
And Aaron, there's a great quote in the movie that Bob Gallagher's character has in the movie where he says, there's something precious about celluloid. And you mentioned before the 8mm film at the start of the movie. What is it about the look, the cinematic texture of that 8mm when it shows on screen that just creeps me out whenever I watch it? It's the cackling, it's the cigarette burns, and it's all that kind of stuff. What is it about that type of film stock that when you play it and you watch it, it's just so creepy? Do you have any ideas, Aaron, why you think that might be?
That's a good question. It does have a subconscious effect when you watch real film. We were actually just talking about how we shot part of our wedding on 8mm film, and then I put it against the backdrop of the Sinister soundtrack, and watching that back, watching our own wedding day, which was one of the most joyous, lively, bright, colorful, stunning moments of our lives. Watching that back all of a sudden became very haunting.
Yeah.
And it gave us this, it just gives the viewer this feeling, this icky feeling that something bad is about to happen to all of these people.
Right.
I just think that because film, I don't want to get too deep into the philosophy of it, at least why I think it's creepy, but there's something about film where you're literally just capturing light, directly from the world right onto celluloid. It's almost like freezing a moment. It just, digital just doesn't, it just doesn't really capture in the same way. It's a lot more clean. I think the dirtiness of film makes it feel more organic and gritty and real. I also think that, now we associate film images with images of the past, and the past can, just looking backwards, can be very creepy and ominous.
Mm-hmm.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. So this is, I like to call them my silly questions. Sometimes I reach for things that when I watch movies, and it might be a theory, it might be something else. So to me, when it comes to Beezel, this is a movie, not wholly, but one of the main themes is consumption. The character itself, it needs to consume to stay alive, and it needs, then you have the role of technologies, and the people in the film are recording things and listening back to things and such. And then we're watching it on our end. We're consuming it as well. Are we the ghouls in this relationship here as a consumer, as a people watching? Are we Beezel, kind of like just consuming all this stuff that's in front of us?
I really
because I was watching it because it was like the different ways I look at it, especially when Bob's character is looking at his reel to reel and he's like really getting into it, right? And then your character, Victoria, as well in the movie, like she looks back at the stuff, and it just seems to me that, we're the consumers as well. We're just taking it all in and we're feeding on it. And like, as you may imagine with my posters behind me, I can't get enough of it. And, I'm all for, give me more. And sometimes filmmakers talk about, almost giving up something like a film to an audience like it's a theme, and it's up to us to kind of take it in, and you don't know what's going to happen. It's just an interesting thing to kind of touch on. Don't know if it's silly or not, but what do you think of that theory and
Certainly.
that
I mean, I
concept?
definitely think leaving a lot of this interpretation up to the viewer is what makes it scary. You know, we don't want to just spoon feed every detail and every theme and every moment. You know, that comes down to the visual element, you know, like we were just talking about earlier, of having a lot of dark spaces within the frame. Let the viewer, you know, sort of look for something, and then that also is applied to the story as well.
Yeah, and I think I really love what you're talking about too, because that's a theme it's very important to me as we move on as a society. You know, I'm of an age where I was able to live before the cell phones were dominated our lives, and now I see what they're up to now. And so that's a question that I really find very interesting to pose and look at in different angles. So I absolutely love your interpretation of how the characters are being consumed and how we, the viewer, fit within that. So really cool.
And I also love in the movie how when you have the three different stories, it almost seems like I'm watching three different subgenres of horror through the movie as well. You talked about the story in the middle. It's kind of like almost kind of slashery in a kind of way where you don't know where she's kind of the nurse is going around, you don't know what's happening where. The first one you got a Super 8 kind of aspect. The last one's kind of like a found footage thing as well. Is that something that was intentional as well to kind of like touch on different kind of styles of horror genre throughout the film, Aaron, where as you're doing it? Or is that something that comes
Definitely
across
wanted,
like
I mean,
organically?
overall, it's a very atmospheric film, and we definitely wanted each section to have its own unique feel.
Mm.
Hopefully there is still, you know, some cohesiveness throughout the whole story. But yeah, just, you know, the same way that, you know, a film from the 70s is just going to inherently have a totally different vibe from a film from 2015, that is exactly what we were going for. So the story, you know, is cohesive and it's all very, very much, you know, connected. But the vibe and the atmosphere should definitely change from decade to decade.
Victoria, I was listening to this interview you did with Film Courage. I think it was from like a few years ago. And one of the things you talked about in that film, in that interview, was about how you need to create every day. You need to do something. You need to create. You need to put stuff out there. And both yourself and Aaron through Social House are like a very incredibly prolific in your short films, and now you've got features. You had Electric Dreams as well. Prior to this film, you got Beezel coming out. Um, when I talk to filmmakers who do shorts and then they move into feature stuff, a lot of times they don't go back to shorts because features is their world now. That's what they're going to go moving forward in. But considering your philosophy is to create every damn day, and we're just considering we're talking about consumption and the need to, just absorb it in, but also in regards to what you're saying, put it back out there as well. When is features enough to live up to the philosophy of to create every damn day, or was short still going to be part of the social house kind of like philosophy moving forward?
I genuinely believe that short films are 100% a future of filmmaking and a growing part of that storytelling style as well. Not only is it great for the viewer and then the creator to then create every damn day, which I really still stand by. I think it's a great, it just makes me feel better every time if I make something and put something out in the world. But I also think that it's so great from the storyteller's aspect, the filmmaker's aspect, because we are never, I mean, ultimately never going to be, but you're always aspiring to be the great filmmaker. They're always aspiring to be the greatest. And I think by doing the short films and creating smaller projects as often as possible, you're in that filmmaking gym, you're in that storytelling gym, you're always gonna be getting better, tighter, feeling what works. And furthermore, staying on the pulse of what people like too. People's tastes are always changing as well. And you stay true to your own self and what you like to tell, but you want to also find that balance because, you want people to check out your stuff too, that you're creating, you're putting so much work into. I hope to always live by that philosophy. And if I'm ever feeling down, it's because I realize, or even Aaron will be like, you haven't made anything in a little while. Maybe you need to write something or actually make something. We need to do a short film. So that always ends up being a really good pick me up. And I highly recommend it.
It's really what makes me happy in life. It's a distraction from just looking too far inward, and it's a good way to just, always keep your mind occupied and feel like you're, creating something.
And I don't know if your audience is primarily filmmakers or on the viewers aspect, but if you're a filmmaker thinking about it, and a filmmaker listening to this and you've made a feature, you know how much time went into the writing, prep, production, and then post, and then eventually distribution and marketing. It could be at least likely a year, probably closer to 1 to 3 years. And I think that if you were to consider, if you're someone who hasn't looked at doing shorts, if you considered doing some shorts, you would find so much bliss and fun, and also productivity, because you can also submit those shorts to, you can just put them right up on YouTube and instantly receive feedback. You can go to the film festival circuit and reach a whole new network of other filmmaker friends. There are just so many fun short-term benefits to making short form. So again, I believe it's the future.
Yeah, and I myself as a writer and content creator, I don't go by a day without trying to write something or film something or what have you, because I just find it's also just a need as well. It's just something that's
Yes.
it's a part of creative types. And that's what I say to my kids as well. It's like every day, it's like, come on, what are we doing today? Get off. I try to get them off the devices and I'm trying to get them to create something, because I think there's a generation of kids out there that you know, some I can create, but some of them I think have lost kind of like that kind of like ability or the drive to do so. So I think it's really important that a lot of people kind of get into that. And I'm just referring back to what you were saying before about, you know, creating every day is kind of like almost like being in a gym. I'll tell you what, Beezel is a gym horror workout in its own, because your pulses will be racing after watching this. And September 20, everyone listening in the US, September 20 in theaters, I really, really, really encourage watch this in theaters first before it comes out on video on demand. If your cinema has it, watch it. If they don't, tell them to put it on, because I think this is the type of movie that's horror. What I love about horror, when you watch it in a cinema more than any other genre, it's such a communal experience. And my favorite part of watching a horror movie, other people in the cinema, is the collective gasp before the scream. And this is one of those movies where you're going to be gasping all the way through, because, like I said before, it has those moments in the film of stillness, and then the release afterwards is just something else. And I really got to I commend you both, because I think people might be a little jaded by like the whole kind of jump scare thing, and you guys mess with convention here. The tone, the pacing, everything, practical effects. I absolutely love Beezel. So everyone out there, if you're in the US, September 20, watch it in theaters, and then watch it again when it comes to September 24 and
Man, I
video on
really
demand.
appreciate that. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.